Hello and welcome to Crucible of Words for more dedicated legacy action. Modern Horizons 3 printed a bunch of Eldrazi, so I thought I'd smash them in a deck and have a crack with them. So the newest additions to the Eldrazi family, Glaring Fleshraker. This pumps out tokens when you cast spells and pings your opponent when you get tokens or any other colourless creature entering the battlefield. So this is quite a nice bit of reach that we can use, as well as allowing us to chain spells. So it's quite good with Kozilek's Command, another new card. So this can make us a bunch of tokens. Each token will ping our opponent for one. And then this can find us, let's say, another big colourless spell, like another Kozilek's Command, if we do the scry and draw a card, and then play that again, sacking our little guys, and then we get more little guys, which then trigger the Fleshraker, and you can see how that's going to go. Another card is Sowing Mycospawn. This card has impressed me a great deal. Being able to choose for a land from your deck is pretty powerful. It means we get to run things like the Wasteland here, so we can really put the pressure on our opponent and then just find things to stop our opponent from being able to recover. This card has just been great when I've played it before. Other new card, the Heralds End. It's a 2-mana Lord, and it does make our Kozilek's Command slightly cheaper if we're casting big ones. But this is like a fine placeholder. Ideally, we'd like something else, but it's a creature that is not a 2-1, so it's much better than Eldrazi Mimic, and we do need it for the curve. Then we have Eldrazi Linebreaker. This basically turns whatever creature you play that turn into a reality smasher, right? It gives it +X/+0 and haste. And it has trample on its own, so you can make it large and just crash for a big bunch. This card looks pretty sweet to me and can really put the damage on. And if we're making lots of little colourless creatures, this can be some pretty large numbers on it. Then we've sort of got the old classics of Thought-Knot Seer and this one. We're running a couple of these. This card isn't great, but it's what we have. And to help power these things out alongside our Ancient Tombs, our Eldrazi Temple and Eye of Ugin, we've got some Spirit Guides. I've got a split of red and green ones because we want to be able to cast these spells. And we also have some sources in the form of Karplusan Forest, which is like a tri-land for us. Same with Grave of the Burnwillows. And then we've got the Cavern of Souls. So we've got 9 sources in our mana base that cast either of our coloured Eldrazi, as well as the Yavimaya, which cast the green ones. And then we've got the Spirit Guides and stuff for the red ones. So that should be more or less fine. And for our disruptive elements, alongside Wasteland, we've got Vexing Bauble. This means that Force of Wills can't be targeting our creatures very easily, because they're not going to be free. So this allows us to play around counter magic quite nicely, and it also answers a lot of the combo decks that go underneath us. I've been very impressed with Vexing Bauble. This is also why we're running Spirit Guides over the Lotus Petals that some people might run in this sort of list. And we've got a couple of Once Upon a Time to smooth things out. And yes, this costs nothing, but we're always going to cast this before the Bauble if we're casting it for free, so there's not really any tension here. I could even see trimming another Endless one for another Once Upon a Time, but we're going to see how these numbers line up. Sideboard-wise, we've got a Karakas that we can dig out with our Mycospawn. Things like Atraxa are a real problem for us because it's just a big lifelink body that eats all of our creatures, so being able to bounce out is really important. We've got a Vexing Bauble to go with our 3 in the main for when we need more of this sort of effect. We've got some Mindbreak Trap. Obviously has some tension with Vexing Bauble, but some decks are killing you turn 1, so having a turn 1 answer feels pretty important. We've got 4 Leyline of the Void, which is obviously for the graveyard matchups, and there's a few of those around at the moment. We've got some Dismembers to kill some creatures that are a bit smaller than like the Atraxa and stuff. And then Disruptor Flute is like a nice piece against spell-based combos and things of that nature. Or, you know, decks that have got things that are going to be a problem for us, like recurring 1 rings and things like that. So yeah, that's the deck. Let's smash and face. Please remember to like and subscribe. It helps the channel out. And it's Eldrazi time. Our opening hand makes a turn 2 Eldrazi Linebreaker, and then follows up with a Kozilek's Command with a couple of Wastelands to pressure our opponent. That is probably okay. It's the low side of what I'm willing to keep, but I think it's worth a crack. Because we have 2 Soul Lands as well, we're relatively Wasteland free. The question is, which ones we play out first? We have to protect our coloured source here, so it's a case of are we playing the Ancient Tomb or the Temple? Temple has the higher upside if it sticks around, but we'd rather have the Ancient Tomb Wastelanded. I think I'm going to play out the Ancient Tomb here, because I'd rather this one Wastelanded than the other one. We can also just play Kozilek's Command as a draw a card for like 2 mana as like a little cycle. It's not great, but that's the thing we're allowed to do. I need the Vial off of a Plains. Alright, so our opponent's a Yoran deck, and they are a Death and Taxes. I don't know how many colours they're going to be, but we'll find out soon enough, I'm sure. Let's play the Linebreaker. Break some lines. Go to attacks. This gets haste. Bash for 4. And let's keep being aggressive. Either Vial ticking up for our opponent. We might not get a lot of purchase with our Wastelands here, but we'll see. Alright, so they are the Black Splash build, most likely, for things like Orcish Bowmasters and shooting up opposition agents. Just another Aether Vial. Okay. That mana advantage hopefully is a thing that we'll win before it matters. But we'll see. Let's play a Glaring Fleshraker. And then we can smash in at the Heralds the end. This gets us a Glaring Fleshraker trigger. So if our opponent has a removal spell, we have to decide what we want to make them spend their removal spell on. They should just remove our Linebreaker before we go to combat if they have a removal spell. So we get to ping our opponent again here. Let's go to combat. If our opponent doesn't have a removal spell right now, okay, it looks like we're getting a removal spell. And they should be hitting the Linebreaker here. Yeah, this is just more mana that we get to use off of our Ancient Tombs to cast more Eldrazi later on, right? Life is mana for us in a roundabout way. So next turn we can cast a large Kozilek's Command. Right, they didn't put in a Mother of Runes. Mother of Runes particularly bad against the old colourless cards, that's for sure. But they didn't put in any 1-drop. I doubt they have much beyond the Mother. I've seen some people running Esper Sentinel lately, which is weird to me. I don't think that card's very good right now. But next turn they get a Vial on 3, which is when they can start dumping out their most impressive plays. You know, Skyclave Apparition, Recruiter of the Guard, Flicker Wisp, that sort of jam. Recruiter of the Guard, here it comes. So we're probably going to see a Solitude, I would imagine. So we can maybe get tricksy with our Kozilek's command timings, because they might not just fire one off straight away. They might wait for us to attack, and then we can Kozilek's command over the top to make sure that we get all our pings with our Fleshraker. Stoneforge Mystic. All right, our opponent's on a different line here. That does change the timing we're going to use for our Kozilek's command, because we're going to remove this Stoneforge so they can't go and get a Batterskull or whatever. They could double block with Stoneforge and Recruiter to take out the Heralds the end. Just putting in the Stoneforge in the end step here, unless they've got something else. No, it's just a Stoneforge, sure. So we can now just go right through this with the Kozilek's command. And hope they don't have a Solitude. A Lion Sash. That is probably saying that they have another piece of equipment in hand. Right, they do have a Solitude here. So probably losing the Fleshraker. They are going for the Fleshraker. 2 cards in hand. I have to imagine they have something to go with this Stoneforge, because this card just doesn't seem that great. So if we play this out, colorless Eldrazi spells you cast cost 2 less to cast. That includes Kozilek's command. So we probably want to kill the Stoneforge and make a bunch of X1s. We could do that, or we could scry for something scarier. So we've got 2, 4, 5, 6, 7 mana. So we get to do this for 5. So we get to do it for 6 because of the Heralds the end. Would I like 6 power and killing their creature? That does seem quite good. Is that better than looking at 6 cards? I think it is. If we had a Fleshraker in play, this would obviously be rather good. We can also sack some of these to help pay for an Eye of Ugin activation and get something spooky. But we don't really care about a Lion Sash. I think our opponent had to have another equipment if that's what they're getting, right? That's not going to help you out of this situation that they're in. They probably have a Batterskull or a Cauldron in hand. Alright, they've had enough of our army of little friends. Okay, so this is a creature matchup where we want to be able to smash stuff with these Dismembers. The Vexing Baubles aren't really at their best here. We could board in the Karakas, just has another mana source, because our opponent will be taxing our mana with effects like Wasteland and Rishadan Port, most likely. But in order to fit in this Karakas, we would have to cut one of our spells. And I don't particularly want to do that. We could board in something like Disruptor Flute to take out Aether Vial, but I just think that's the wrong way to approach it. I think we're better off just having these removed and just keeping a solid selection of bodies that our opponent has to remove. So I'm going to submit like this with just the Dismembers in. Well, our opening hand does not play Magic the Gathering, so back it goes. This one does play Magic the Gathering, so I will keep this one. We do have a little bit of tension here with Mycospawn and the Simian Spirit Guide. But the Simian Spirit Guide will allow us to Thought-Knot Seer. Are we supposed to keep this Mycospawn? I don't think so. I think we're supposed to just keep the cards we can cast and use this to power out turn 2 Thought-Knot Seer. Throwing away the card you can't cast seems like the smart move there. An Arid Mesa. There's a possibility our opponent has red in their deck as well. Like there used to be Makers of the Moon builds. But I'm not expecting that. Right, Aether Vial. That's the sort of thing our opponent wants to start the game off with. A Linebreaker. I would rather have a Linebreaker than an It That Heralds the End here. But if we play the Linebreaker, we don't get the Thought-Knot Seer next turn. Unless we draw the right land. It's kind of a tricky one. Because we play this, and then next turn we can play It the Heralds the End plus a Dismember. Or maybe if we draw the right land, we can play the Thought-Knot Seer. This is a really interesting inflection point here. I'm cracking for 4 now and just start the beats coming. It depends on how we're valuing our mana base as well. Because our opponent can start wastelanding us and hiding behind their Vial, which makes this Simian Spirit Guide more precious for the Thought-Knot Seer for turn 2. Alright, I'm going to go with this It the Heralds the End. Maybe that's playing conservatively. We're supposed to just go like really hard and just play the 3-drop and maybe draw ourselves into another piece of fast mana or a soul land. But we'll see. Alright, not a Wasteland. So we've escaped that little problem. A Scrublands, that turns on our Wasteland as an offensive tool. Emperor of Bones. Okay, this can become a creature based on what it exiles. But we can dismember this if it becomes a problem. We can Wasteland our opponent and play a Linebreaker. Or we could play this Thought-Knot Seer and take a look at what's going on in our opponent's hand. I think I like seeing our opponent's hand more than getting this Linebreaker down right now. I don't really want to send this It the Heralds to trade with this Emperor of Bones. Containment Priest, Battle of Bywater, Witch Enchanter. Okay, so Battle of Bywater is basically the only card in their hand that really does anything that we care about. So, also no Wasteland in there, which is pretty excellent for us. We're willing to find a red source to play these Linebreakers, which is the downside of playing this Thought-Knot Seer. Emperor of Bones. I don't think it's going to exile anything. It the Heralds the End. This is a thing we get to cast right now. So we can attack with both of these. And if something goes really wrong, we still have this Dismember to fall back on. Just playing good old-fashioned Battlecruiser magic. Right, it looks like they got a removal spell for It the Heralds the End. Oh, they're adapting this. Okay, so now we can snipe this down with a Dismember if we want. Seems a-okay to me. Oh, okay, drew another Emperor of Bones. They've got 1 mystery card in hand. They have no mystery cards in hand. So they've got a Containment Priest, and they've also got the Emperor of Bones. They're going to exile their own Emperor of Bones. A Wasteland. That's not really what we're after here. So they can play the Containment Priest and activate the Emperor of Bones and trade into this Thought-Knot Seer. Or we could attack. I guess if we Wasteland them off of one of their lands, they can't do both. But I'm pretty sure they're just going to put in the Containment Priest as soon as we do that. If we attack here, they can block here and eat this, but then they're going to take 9. And that will put them to 3. Or they can chump block here as well. It's a case of, do I think they're more interested in getting this Thought-Knot Seer off the battlefield or taking out this It the Heralds the End? Because they can block here, pump this. This eats this for free. Lets us get 1 extra point of damage in now. And then if we draw a red source, we can just play the Linebreaker and be away. That's a bit of a tough call. I think that's slightly better. Having more creatures makes the Linebreaker a lot more powerful if we can draw a red source. They're going to adapt this. They're going to trade these both into it now. Yeah, this is pretty good, the old Emperor of Bones. It's doing a lot more work than I thought it was going to. Card out of this as well. I think that's better than throwing these in as well. Because otherwise they just gobble this up. And then they put the other one in front of this. And then they sweep all these out of the way and just take the 4 from the, or the 6 from the Emperor of Bones. I think that's okay. Like, we have to get their Emperor of Bones out of the way at some point. I guess the Containment Priest is a little bit awkward with the Emperor of Bones as well. They're probably getting towards putting Yorin in their hand. Curious why they're not playing anything. I guess they're just holding up for the Containment Priest. But it doesn't seem the most amazing. It depends what this last card in their hand is as well. Red source? It's a red source. That's very good for us. Would I like to start stripping my opponent's lands out? Or would I like to save some life here? I think I'm going to pay the life here. Just get a large friend. If I've got a removal spell, it happens now rather than when we get to combat. Tapping this for 3. A Skyclave Apparition. Okay. That was the last card in their hand. So we can attack and trade this for the Skyclave Apparition and get a 3/3 back. Is that better? I don't think it is better. I think we're just holding again. It's getting eerily close to our opponent being able to turn the corner on this one. We need him to not draw something good for a turn. I think we were right to trade off our Thought-Knot Seer, but it's a little bit awkward still. If we can dodge a Wasteland, then we can deploy another Linebreaker. This probably has to be at the expense of our Wastelands rather than paying life. But if our opponent starts putting Yori into hand, Things can get out of hand quite quickly here. There's the Yorion in hand. Right, there's no point wasting our opponent because they can just Ether Violet next turn. Not really the one we wanted, was it? Alright, Linebreaker. Time to break some lines. They had a plow as well. Just one time opponent. Okay, so they can't put anything in. They can put in the Witch Enchanter though, right? So they can double block here. But if they do that, they don't get to flicker this, but they still get to take one of these out anyway. I think we are sending them. Yep, here comes the Witch. Can get double block. We can take out the Skyclave. That stops them having a Skyclave to flicker. We get a 3/3. It's not ideal, but it's what we have. Alright. What can we have here? Yorion is now able to come and ruin our day. Dismember does clean up a Yorion pretty effectively, though. Well, well, well. We have an Eye of Ugin. We can tutor for some creatures. It's going to take quite a lot of life off of us if we do that. So we could tutor for a creature and play it. No, we can't. We can only play an endless one now. That's not really good enough. Okay. I guess we will pass the turn here. I don't want to jump into this Yorion and get gobbled up. So we can tutor for another hasty guy. We can tutor for a Mycospawn. But that doesn't seem amazing here. The Wasteland. They're going to pressure us into finding a threat. This makes it really awkward. Because if we go get the red creature, they just Wasteland our Cavern. Pick 4. So we basically don't get to use our Ancient Tombs to cast one of our creatures here. It only fetches creatures. Are we supposed to get like a Fleshraker here? But if we tap these, we go to 1. So these get turned off. And then our opponent wastes like the Ugin or the Cavern. And then we are not having a lot of mana. But if we don't tap them, we get 2 more draw steps naturally. Is that better than tapping this Eye of Ugin now? We need to draw Kozilek's commands and pump a load of mana into it. So I think we're just going to draw a card. Kozilek's command, please. 1 time deck. Nothing we can do about that. A Dismember. Okay, I can live with that. I guess we send in the illusion token. See if they want to do the trade here. They do want to take the trade. I'm willing to trade off and take out this Containment Priest here. Containment Priest means that with Flicker Wisp they can do some pretty gross things. And I don't think we can afford to Dismember and try and blow out that combat. Are we Dismembering this now? I think we have to do it in case our opponent draws a Karakas here. Alright, welcome to Top Deck Wars, I guess. I'd rather not have to burn my Wasteland to deal with the Karakas. Play like a Plains opponent, that's what I want to see. 1 time, have a bad draw for us. We need help. We can draw like Kozilek's command, draw a whole bunch of cards, that'd be pretty good. I think we have to block here. Can't afford to keep taking this damage. That poor little Eldrazi. The only thing it heralded end-wise was its own. Poor little guy. Our opponent must have something that they're pondering over there. Oh, jeez. Wowzers trousers. Yeah, our opponent is ripped pretty hot here. Yikes. Flicker Wisp. Yep, so then they Flicker Wisp the Recruiter, and then they go and get a Solitude that they can put in off the Ether Vial. I think this game is done. Yikes. Yeah, that's pretty good. We had no window there to Wasteland them, because they could just float the mana. Yikes, indeed. Kozilek's return still reasonable here. Sorry, Kozilek's command, not return. Kozilek's return would also be pretty good, but we can't cast that one. Fleshraker. So we play this, they Solitude it. We go up to 7, they bash and kill us. Yep, that was some amount of drawing from our opponent that didn't really help us out very much. I don't think I want to do anything differently here. We're just going to go back in. Maybe being on the play will be enough. But yeah, Emperor of Bones into the plow was a lot for us to deal with. And then the Recruiter of the Guard, when we sort of got to parity, was a bit awkward too. But our opponent's deck had that extra card from the Yorion, so that's where they got the extra power there. Like they did have a couple of turns where they didn't draw, where they just drew lands. But because they get the extra card from being a Yorion deck, that was like the big difference. which is how a deck's constructed, so can't really argue with that. Okay, I like this hand. Am I playing a turn 1 Fleshraker? Or am I playing a turn 1 at the Heralds of the End? I think I kind of want to get this Fleshraker down because it just makes everything better if this is in play. Is that better than just at the Heralds of the End into turn 2 Thought-Knot Seer though? Maybe it is better to do this and save our Simian Spirit Guide for the Thought-Knot Seer. Alright, let's play a Grizzly Bear. But it will make our Thought-Knot Seer bigger. Shadowy Backstreet. Okay, this makes our Thought-Knot Seer even better because it gets to have a look at our opponent's hand before they have mana for something like a Plow. A Linebreaker. That's a pretty good card. I'll play Son Eldrazi. I think we are still supposed to make this Thought-Knot Seer though. What have you got, opponents? The Battle of Bywater is pretty annoying. The Skyclap Apparition, also pretty annoying. Stoneforge, we don't care about that much. The Recruiter of the Guard, pretty annoying in a different way. Is it the Skyclave or the Battle? The Battle can kill multiple of our things. So I think it is the Battle of Bywater that goes here. If we draw a mana source, we can kill the Stoneforge Mystic. If we don't draw a mana source, then that can be awkward, but I believe in us. They're kind of priced into getting a Batterskull, and the Kozilek's command can just exile the Germ token anyway. There's a Stoneforge, as expected. If they got Jitte, I imagine they got quite deep. Yeah, so there's the Batterskull. If they put this in, we can blow them out with a well-timed Kozilek's command. An Eye of Ugin. Okay, so we can have it all here, right? So we can play this for 1 mana. And then we can cast the Linebreaker for 2 mana. Alright, now we're really pod racing over here. Alright, yep, our opponent's had enough. We have the Stomping Power. I think the decision to attack with the Thought-Knot Seer and the Emperor of Bones is kind of interesting in game 2. I think we did need to get through that in the end, rather than just waiting because we didn't have any readily apparent red sources, otherwise we could have played differently. Nevertheless, we did get there in the end. Let's go to round 2. Okay, I like this one. We've got a couple of threats and another threat as well. Grim Monolith. Alright, so our opponent's going to be on that combo train. Draw a card, get the most amount of information before we... Once upon a time, so we know what we're looking for. We could just start wastelanding our opponent and hope to choke them on mana. Or we could get aggressive and play a Fleshraker straight up this turn. If we take the Spirit Guide, we go Spirit Guide, Eldrazi Temple. Play Fleshraker. And then we're still 1 shy of casting it at the Heralds of the End. Do I want to just attack my opponent's mana here and go slower? Is that good enough? Or do I need to go faster and try and just make some plays happen? I think I want the Wasteland. I don't think we're going to beat a combo deck. Alright, I think we're just going to take out this Ancient Tomb. We need to make our opponents stumble from what they kept their hand for. So if they're a combo deck, their hand probably was enough to do the thing they wanted to, and us making some threats. Oh, okay. We're a colourless Cloud Post deck. That changes the mass a little bit. Okay, let's play this. Get Fleshraker down. And then we just start playing out at the Heralds of the End whilst wastelanding our opponent. That should feel pretty tasty. Depends what our opponent does this turn as well. Like we could see Glimmer Post into Golos. That'd be a pretty strong play. Ancient Tomb. I can still play a Golos this turn if they want it. It'll cost them their Grim Monolith, but it's definitely worth. Just holding the mana open. That is peculiar. We don't have the green mana for this. And I do think we want to kick this in this matchup. I think this is the case of casting this. And then we wasteland our opponent. Which lands do we want to get rid of? Is it the one that gives them the most mana right now? Or is it the one that can give them more mana later and doesn't hurt them to activate? I think it's the Cloud Post here. And then force them into Ancient Tomb activations. Right, we cash for 3 this turn and we crash for lots next turn. Yep, our opponent's just had enough. Okay, some sort of colourless style deck. I don't believe the Vexing Baubles are going to be that useful here. Are we looking at Disruptor Flutes? Maybe stop our opponent doing the bigger things. What are they doing with their big mana? Probably trying to cast Eldrazi's. Having the Disruptor Flute to make something more expensive is probably where I want to be. Arguably we can have Dismember for Golos, but I think we can probably just beat through the Golos or take out the hand. But they usually only run 2 or 3 copies of that. I think I'm okay with this. Like, the Kozilek's command is just a combo piece with our Fleshraker at this point. It does sometimes become removable, but I think I like this. Alright, we'll go in and see if we need to change things up. I think the big mana deck is not one that's going to care about Vexing Bauble. This is a weird hand. We can't cast all the things we want to cast because of the colourless pip. If this was 2 and a red, then it'd be a different kettle of fish. But the Linebreaker is not that. We are on the draw though, and we do have a Wasteland, which is going to be one of the key cards in this matchup. The Eye of Ugin only reduces colourless, not the special Eldrazi actual colour. The colourless colour, whatever you want to call it. The colourless symbol mana only reduces the numbered. So it won't make it the Heralds free. It's the distinction between colourless mana and generic mana. Our opponent's thinking a long time on this opener. I think I'm going to keep this one. It's kind of a bit weird looking, but I believe in the power of Wasteland. Thought-Knot Seer is quite nice, but like I said, I believe in the power of Wasteland. It compels me. Another Cloud Post, okay. I think we play the Eye of Ugin so that we have the chance of playing the Thought-Knot Seer next turn. If we draw an Ancient Tomb or an Eye of Ugin or a Mana Dork, not Mana Dork, Simian Spirit Guide. It's kind of a Mana Dork, but not really. Ah, there we go. It was the one I wanted. This also gives us more information about what to do with our Disruptor Flute. Let's take our opponent's payoff. A Thought-Knot Seer, a Kozilek's Command, a Warping Whale. I think I don't want this Thought-Knot Seer. We want to be the people with creatures while our opponent is sort of struggling to deal with the amount of damage we're putting out. Ancient Tomb, 2, 4, 6. They can Kozilek's Command this away if they want to. We could jam another Thought-Knot Seer. That seems pretty reasonable. It puts our opponent in a really awkward position as well, which is something I'm always a fan of doing. Because if they Kozilek's Command this, then we get to take whatever card they've searched up for. Tapping the Grim Monolith as well, going big. This will shut down the amount of mana they have for next turn as well. The other option here is they make a whole bunch of little guys. Yeah, they're making a bunch of little guys and killing our creature. But we get to see what they draw off of this and then take it. And what have they found here? Found another Kozilek's Command. Okay. So we're going to get another card here rather than getting lots of little guys. Which is kind of interesting. So little guys makes it very hard for us to pressure them, although we do have a Trampler coming along soon. So they draw a card before our Thoughtseize effect resolves. Alright, they don't have anything. Understood. Okay. We need a little bit more mana. Vesuva, that's probably going to be a Cloud Post. They've also got a lot of Glimmer Posts. I think our opponents should be able to get over the hump here. We just need to find some action. This is a spell we can cast. Let's cast it. This makes it a lot easier for us to unload our hand next turn. If we can find something like an Eldrazi Temple, then we'll have a lovely time. Right, so they're untapping their Grim Monolith at end step, I believe. No, 8 mana in the pool. Okay, what are they doing? They draw another command. Yeah, our opponent's going pretty big and over the top of us here. Yep. Scrying 6. At least we're showcasing how good Kozilek's Command can be. Unfortunately, we're on the receiving end of it rather than the one dealing it out. 4 top. Was that 4 top, 2 bottom? 4 on the top. That's a lot of cards on the top. So our opponent's basically got quite a few good draws coming up. Yeah, we're not playing this game anymore. The big Eldrazi's gave us a rough time there. I don't think we're doing anything differently here. I think we just want to be aggressive and be on the play. Disruptor Flute does hit both players. So naming the Kozilek's Command is a little bit funky there. What does this do? This allows us to do some Kozilek's Commands as well. I'm down with that. Turn 1 at the Heralds the end. And then we can start doing some Kozilek-y goodness pretty early on. So next time we can do a Kozilek's Command by X is 3. If we want to. By pitching our Spirit Guide. Sorcerer's Spyglass. That doesn't impact anything we have right now. And it can't name tokens. It has to name a card. It can name the Eye of Ugin. Alright, they're going to name our Wasteland. Sure. That doesn't do anything right now. Endless one. What do we want to do with this? We can make some spawn tokens right now. And dig. But what are we going to find with it? Probably nothing of note. We can do this in our opponent's turn and get more information. Do you want to play a 2-2 Eldrazi? I think so. Sure, we'll make a 2-2. Well, it's actually a 3-3 because of the other guy. But we need to put the pressure on our opponent before they can do what they're doing. Thankfully, they have an Ancient Tomb, so that is going to be a real burden on their life total. A Grim Monolith, that's pretty strong. They got anything to do with it right now? Like land into One Ring would be very strong. We could play the Disruptor Flute on the One Ring. I think I value getting more power in play. Khan, the Great Creator. Okay. So you have a 2-2. Understood. Exile target creature and make spawns. I don't think we pay this because we might be able to do some Mycosynth stuff. This is just acceptable as is. This gets us more power. Another Eye of Ugin. That's not very helpful, is it? Am I attacking this card or am I just going to play Disruptor Flute? I think I'm just going to play the Disruptor Flute. We do need to pressure our opponent's life total, so I value getting our damages in here. This is half our opponent's life total, more or less. We're willing to find an additional point of damage if we want to finish them next turn. So I am regretting not using that Elvish Spirit Guide for our Kozilek command now. But if they tap this Ancient Tomb, it doesn't matter. But I think keeping the Spirit Guide in case we draw the guy that draws, that tutors you a land to tutor a Wasteland would be very handy. Opponent's on 10, so it didn't matter about the 1 life there either. Kozilek's command again. Okay, we'll go to attacks. Opponent's on 3. We can Kozilek's command now. I'm looking for a Wasteland. So make some guys and draw a card here. These just untap if we do this anyway, just lets us dig more cards. That seems fine to me. We could have a Thought-Knot Seer, we could just Wasteland our opponent off of a Glimmer Post. We could get a Glaring Fleshraker here. Yeah, we can probably kill our opponent here. So we go bottom, 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 bottom. We'll leave this one because this one is okay. Okay, so then we can cast this for 1 mana. And then we just Kozilek's command our opponent out. And then these will come in and ping our opponent. So yeah, that worked out all right for us. We did have a bit of trouble with red mana, which I thought might be a thing we'd get hung up on a little bit. And that did happen in game 2. But overall, the deck felt pretty strong still. Let's go to round 3. Turn 1 Mycospawn into turn 2 Thought-Knot Seer. Sign me up. I think we do need to use our Spirit Guides to cast the Mycospawn though. We could do a turn 1 Thought-Knot Seer, but that leaves us at the mercy of quite a few things. If our opponent does some scary combo stuff and we have to, then sure. Nethergoyf. Alright, I can live with that. Another Eldrazi Temple. Oakley dokley. Let's cast this one. We could get a Cavern of Souls here. That gives us the option of casting the Mycospawn next turn if we want it. I like that. Force of Will, Pitching Brainstorm. Sure. So we can cast another Mycospawn, or we can cast the Thought-Knot Seer. A Preordain. Don't see Preordains very often. I guess they've got this because they want more cards for Delirium for Nethergoyf. So it's possible our opponent is also playing Dragon's Rage Channel and leaning more heavily into the Delirium. So it could be on like a Grixis list. But we'll see. There it is. Look at that. And a Ponder. So the Nethergoyf's only going to be a 2-3. If we draw a piece of fast mana, we might be able to do Mycospawn and Thought-Knot Seer in 1 turn. Because the land Mycospawn finds you is untapped, which is pretty cool. Opponent doesn't have many cards left either, so our big guys should hopefully overrun what they've got going on. A Simian Spirit Guide. You know that thing I said I wanted? Well, here we are. So we can go 2 for this, 2 for this. The green has to come off of this. We could cast this for Kicker, but I think I don't need that. So we get the Eye of Ugin or the Temple. I think is the Temple, the Eye better here? Or is it the Temple? So we get the Eye. Just casually dumping in 7 power on turn 2. A Lightning Bolt and a Psychic Frog. Psychic Frog is probably the scare of those 2 things right now. But Lightning Bolt does kill our creature. Alright, our opponent doesn't even want to make us make the choice. We are just stomping away. Okay, our opponent's going to have some creatures that I would quite like to dismember. The Vexing Bauble does stop counter magic from our opponent, so I quite like that as well. Kozilek's command is a little bit pricey for what it does here. That could be one of the things that takes a powder. I guess it's a dismember. How much do I value the baubles is the question. We have a 2-2 split, the worst of both worlds, I guess. I think we probably do want the third dismember. If we want the baubles, they've got to come at a cost. With one of our other things. I do like Once Upon a Time quite a lot here. I don't really want to get rid of that. I'm not really sure we have any other options that are worth cutting here. So maybe we're just having one bauble as a thing. We could cut another command or an endless one. I'm not convinced by those options. Maybe an endless one for a bauble is reasonable. That gives us 6 ways to make uncounterable Eldrazi, which should be enough. Because any of our guys getting into play is probably going to be enough to overload a lot of what our opponent can do. If they're relying on things like lightning bolts, that's not going to work against 4/4s. Okay, we're asking a fair bit from this Once Upon a Time. But we have the ways of making uncounterable Eldrazi, which is really important. So I will keep this. We also have a draw step because we're on the draw. There is a Volcanic Island. There is a Ponder. So if our opponent kept a mana open, we'd have to consider Spell Pierce, but I don't believe our opponent is willing to daze a Once Upon a Time. It's not a thing you see happen very often. And we do want a Once Upon a Time before we play our land, because a lot can change depending on what we draw here. Alright, let's find an Eldrazi Temple and just make a Linebreaker or something. Well, that thing I just said is a thing we can do now. So we could play this Linebreaker right now, or we could just play it at the Heralds the end. We could play a Linebreaker now and a Linebreaker next turn. That sounds pretty strong, doesn't it? Now, this is something our opponent is certainly going to be willing to daze, but it's going to have to be a force of will by the looks of things. Pitching and Preordained, sure. The next one is uncounterable. What we don't want to see here is a Wasteland. But that is the nature of our deck. We sometimes get caught out by Wastelands. Not a Wasteland. Excellent news for us. We're going to see here Delver. Nope. Another cantrip. Dragon's Rage Channeler, sure. So it looks like a Lightning Bolt might be in our future here. So we might be incentivized to try and play around this. Does this Wasteland help us play around this? Not particularly. We could make a 3/3 Endless one and see if that incurs a Lightning Bolt from our opponent. So I'd rather that than the Linebreaker get hit. I think this is the play here. And I'm going to save the Cavern of Souls, because I don't want that to get Wastelanded. Our opponent's already shown us they don't have a daze. Let's just make a 3-mana 3/3. So we can uncounterable Thought-Knot Seer. We can Cavern of Souls. Okay, no Lightning Bolt. That's intriguing. They left open very specifically mana that looked like Lightning Bolt to me. Murktide Regent into the graveyard. Does that mean they have another one already? Because that's the sort of creature that can actually fight with the power and toughness of our creatures. Right, we're just in with the 3/3. If they want to remove it, they have to do it in the next turn cycle, so that's good. Brainstorm in the upkeep to get rid of the card that they put on top. They don't want a Force of Will. At present, they have 3 types in their graveyard. Any fetch land or wasteland will give them Delirium. Ideally, not a wasteland. Not a wasteland. Excellent. Is this just a Murktide? No, it's not. Okay, so I want to play the Thought-Knot Seer, I think, here, so that we don't get hit by a Murktide. Okay, they left the card on top with the Channeler. This is the situation where if you're in paper, you look very carefully at how your opponent manipulates the top of the deck and see if they put that one card into their hand or they float it on top. But we don't get to do that online. Alright, another Ponder. So they put the card on top, then shuffle their library of that first one. Then they put the card on top of their library again. So maybe there was one card that was okay, but not enough to justify the other 2 cards that were there. We want to see a shuffle here. They're not using the ability. A Mishra's Bauble. Yep, you're seeing a lot of stuff over there, opponent. That's for sure. They go for the card draw now. That means you're quite likely to see what they put on top with the Ponder. They might be playing around a Thought-Knot Seer and floating the good card on top. Yeah, it looks like what they're doing. What does that mean for us, though? We're obviously playing this land out and naming Eldrazi. Are we slamming a giant monster here? Or do we want to take a look at our opponent's hand and sort of navigate from there? If we slam a big monster... 2 cards in our opponent's hand. The good card is going to be the one on top. Definitely. I think I still want to see what our opponent's working with. Price of Progress. Okay, that can do quite a bit of damage to us. So I have to imagine the top card of the library is a Murktide Regent level card, because that is a sort of thing that can stabilize a bit here. But if we can find a land next turn, we can play it, the Heralds the End, and Eldrazi Linebreaker, and send a creature that's big enough to beat through the Murktide. And they can't really attack with the Murktide at that point either. Yep, so they're going to attack first, then they'll play the Murktide, which will shrink their channeler. They have 2 mystery cards. Nethergoyf. Okay, that is a 5/6. That's reasonable. As I'm going to see. You can see the Murktide, just a Psychic Frog with no cards in hand. That's not too shabby. Let's see what we can find over here. An Ancient Tomb. That is a pretty exciting one, isn't it? So we can go 1/2 for this guy. We know we're not getting counterspelled. Eldrazi Linebreaker. Make things large. This is only +X +0, so it's not going to mean that we can get through and survive here. So probably just going to make our Endless one big, because you know we don't really care about the Endless one if it dies. Just going to attack. Would you like to trade your Nethergoyf? They can obviously get the Nethergoyf back. How many different types they got here? They only got 1 artifact. Artifact, creature, instant sorcery, land. But when they get it back, it will be smaller, so we can trample over it. They can draw an extra card here with the frog, but hopefully this game isn't going to be about that. Wouldn't mind seeing another Eldrazi Linebreaker. That would be pretty savage. I do feel like I'm missing Reality Smasher a little bit. Like we do have Linebreaker, which is a pseudo Reality Smasher. Alright, so they're going to crash in for 4 here. Possibly 5 if they want to discard a card to the frog. But we have a fair amount on the crackback. Not discarding to frog. Okay. 2 lightning bolts can be enough to kill us next turn with this channeler. Just something we have to be aware of. A Brainstorm. I have to imagine this is the card they drew off the frog, because otherwise you probably cast it first, so you know if you're going to be able to pump your frog and get that additional damage or not, which might be relevant. So they milled a channeler with the channeler's ability. What's next? This is a Murktide. That's the sort of thing we don't want to see here. Okay, it's just the Nethergoyf. 5/6. And the Bauble. Milled away a Delta. It's getting a little bit tight over here for us. First time I've actually seen anyone escape a Nethergoyf though. Kozilek's Command would be quite nice. Another Linebreaker. Kozilek's Command, you say? So this is 2, 4, 5, 6. So if we ping this down, we make a bunch of tokens. Are we playing around days is the question. So you want to exile a creature. If we make a bunch of tokens, this is 3, 4, 5, 6. If they discard, or they can 3. Boltos is 6, and this is 7, 8. That is a bit of a toughie. Okay, so we want to make some tokens. I think we want to exile this Nethergoyf. And we pay 2 for this. And pay this. And pay this. We don't want to tap our Ancient Tomb if we can avoid it. X is currently 2. So now when we go to combat, this can give this guy a bunch of damage. And that is lethal. Alright. We got the match there. We're cooking pretty well with this deck so far. It feels touch and go sometimes, like we're sort of on a razor's edge whether or not we win or lose some games, but we do keep pulling it out. Let's go to round 4. We've won a die roll again. Certainly a thing I enjoy doing. Turn 1, Glaring Fleshraker. I can play a turn 1 Glaring Fleshraker, couldn't I? And make a turn 2 at the Heralds End. That seems reasonable. If our opponent just removes this straight away, it's going to be a bit sad for us. But if they don't, we can really start putting our foot on the gas, because making tokens that also get pumped by at the Herald's End is very much a good place to be. Just play like a Surveil land, please, opponent. That'd be nice. Or a Ponder. Could live with that. Just no Bolt or Plow or Push or something like that. A Mox Diamond. Okay, this could be horrible in a different way. Verdant Catacombs. Exploration. Okay. Thespian Stage. We're just going to get... Oh, okay, this is like the lands Nadu deck. So our opponent could like play a whole bunch of their deck next turn. A Vexing Bauble doesn't really help us anymore. I think we are on the plan. Playing guys. This is also a colourless spell that does trigger Glaring Fleshraker, so it's not completely dead. It effectively gives us the mana back as well. But this turn it was definitely more important to get the Heralds at the end. I don't believe our opponent's playing any more 0 drops right now. Right, Surveilled away a Bajuka Bog. Please don't Dark Depths me. I wouldn't particularly enjoy Nadu coming to play this turn either. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. This is better than Dark Depths because Dark Depths does just kill us. But our opponent gets to draw at least 2 cards here. Life from the Loam. So we do get to see what these cards are. Okay. I don't mind the Loam. What's the next one? A Yavimaya. Okay. Don't play any more creatures, please. A Wasteland. That is pretty irritating, truth be told. That 4/4 Nadu is actually a pretty sizable problem for us. Okay, so our opponent's going to Wasteland lock us starting from next turn. We do not have good enough power to get through what our opponent's got. A Linebreaker. Can't cast this. We can cast the Vexing Bauble. That gives us a token at least. But I believe our opponent has won this game. They're drawing 2 additional cards every turn. And they have Life from the Loam. So effectively they're drawing 5 cards a turn. I don't believe we can beat that. But I'd like to see a little bit more about our opponent's deck because it's kind of interesting. There's not really a defined version of this deck yet. Our opponent is probably running the Eldrazi Sagas to go and tutor for these Shukos. Okay. Another Wasteland. Goodbye. So we can play a Linebreaker if we draw the right mana. And maybe that's enough to do something here. Or we could play another Fleshraker. And perhaps that gets us there. Right, I've got an Otawara. So we can beat the Maze of Ith using Glaring Fleshraker. But the Otawara, they can start firing off right now. And that's obviously pretty horrible for us. Yeah, we basically just lost this game on turn 2. Pretty yikes. I don't think it's worth sacrificing a spawn here to draw a card. An endless one. I don't think we can come back from this position anymore. That was absolutely savage. How are we supposed to beat this? I don't really like Vexing Bauble here. It only deals with their Mox Diamond, which isn't really the problem. Karakas can bounce a Nadu. That doesn't feel great. The Disruptor Flute can do some work here. Dismembers can do some work here. And Leyline of the Void can do some work here. Leyline of the Void shuts down Life from the Loam. Do we care about Life from the Loam, or do we more just care about stopping Shuko and Wasteland? I think the answer to that is the Shuko and Wasteland side, so I'm not going to board in the Dismembers, and we're just going to try and ride it out using these Disruptor Flutes, and just being aggressive. We could board in this Karakas as an extra land. I don't hate that. Let's take out and end this one and just have an extra land. Try and make the Wasteland battle a little bit less scary. Okay. Kozet's command makes us mana. And we can start off with an 8 at the Heralds at the end, which isn't too shabby. So we can play this into a small Kozilek's command next turn. We can also use the Kozilek's command for Graveyard Hate for Life from the Loam and stuff like that. Exploration. We can see a Wasteland, a Tabernacle, and a Shuko. Well, that's pretty rude, isn't it? Once upon a time. What wonderful timing you have there. I guess we'll play out this Karplusan Forest. Feels like we're going to get pretty badly bodied here. So the Kozilek's command is no longer any good for what we're trying to achieve. Wow. And they get to tap their Tabernacle for mana to double Wasteland us this turn. Yeah, I think we're done here. I do love a nice Wasteland lock. That was brutal. Didn't even feel like we had a remote chance with our opponent's hands in those 2 games. Like, we lost the game on turn 2 both games. By what our opponent assembled was just enough to beat us. Alright. Let's go to the final round. We are 3-1, so we're fighting for the 4-1. We're on the play for the final round, which is not a bad place for us to be. What does our hand do? Makes a turn 1 Vexing Bauble, turn 2 Linebreaker. That's reasonable. I don't really want to get scammed with this hand, but I think we have some reasonable plays. The Vexing Bauble can shut down a lot of decks. And we do just get to start tripping with our Kozilek's command. Well, our opponent's going to know what we're all about. Let's play an Eldrazi Temple. So we've got the Vexing Bauble in play. We already have the Cavern of Souls, so it's not really the most important thing. But it can shut down some of our opponent's lines. It can stop Grief being able to scam us as well. It can stop Solitudes. A Mountain. It can stop Chromoxes. Basic Mountain makes me think Painter or some sort of mono red Stompy style list. Alright, Linebreaker. No lightning bolt from our opponent there. Crash for 4. Next turn we can do a pretty large Kozilek's command. It's like Kozilek's command for 3, that gives us +3 damage. Right, so it does feel a bit paintery over there. Fail the Mirror Breaker, so we can just exile that, make some guys that makes our thing bigger. Ideally I'd like to have another threat or something here. End this one. You are a threat technically. I think we play the endless one, the Eye of Ugin here. Are we exiling this? Or are we just going to dig for some cards? I think I'd rather just dig for some cards and make some more guys. This gives us +3 damage this turn. Well, +4 actually. It the Heralds the End. Looks pretty good here. I do quite like the Wasteland against this as a saga though. Yeah, maybe we need to... Right, so we can put this on the bottom. Don't want to draw it at the Heralds the End next turn. Sure. I think that's pretty reasonable. We can cast this, but it'll get countered by the Bauble. Let's see if they want to take 7. They do want to take 7. So they don't know about this Wasteland they're about to drop on them before they get their As a Saga to pop off. So this does feel like a Painter deck, because you wouldn't normally see an As a Saga in the Blood Moon decks. Obviously Painter can run Blood Moon itself. It tends to be a sideboard option unless they're running Imperial Recruiter. They can have one in the main. But that's kind of old tech that you don't see very often these days, because Painter just gets to run lots of really good spells now, without having to try and cheese people with Blood Moon in the main. As a Saga, too good to play that. Prismatic Vista. So we could be looking at the red-white build. Yeah, the red-white build. We get to attack for an awful lot of damage next turn. Another Fable. Sure. It's important to remember the Linebreaker doesn't give Trample. It only gives haste. It has Trample itself. So Source to Plowshares is something that might happen here. We need to be aware of that. Did I not put the... I'm sure I put the guy on top. Did I misclick? I must have misclicked. All right. That is definitely a downside for us. Let's just snap with this Wasteland straight off. We don't want this as a Saga being in this game. So we can make a 4-4 and a 3-3 this turn. Or we can just make a 5-5. So do you want to make our token big and force us to trade with the token? Doesn't really matter, does it? Let's just put it on the guy who just played. That makes the most sense here. Just force us to chump block on the endless one. And they have to try and kill us next turn. I don't think we need to play an endless one out here. I guess we could turn this into a... we could turn one of these into a 3-3. That gives us a blocker. Alright, Fable. Hopefully we kill them before they get to start doing Fable shenanigans. But we didn't see a plow from our opponent that turn either. But they're looting, so they might find one. So the plan here is probably just to give our Linebreaker the big pumps so it can trample over. Another Fable. Okay, so we've got 6 power of creatures. And 6 toughness. Vexing Bauble wasn't really the one we want here. So this is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So they can block 6 and 3 trample over. But they probably have to block this and this. And then put this one here. This is 8, so 6 get through. So as long as they don't have something for free. Something for 1 mana here. So Lightning Bolt or Source to Plowshares. We could sacrifice this Vexing Bauble. See if we find another Linebreaker. I don't think our opponent's got anything for 0 mana that we have to care about here. Wasteland doesn't really do anything for us here. Just play another one of these. Let's go attacks. Then we give it to Trampler. Alright, they would have plowed it in response if they had a plow. So I've done my calculations, this should be alright. So I can block those 2, and then 6 gets through on this one. I don't think they've read that this card has trample. They didn't have a good block there anyway, to be fair. Alright. Our opponent is playing Painter's Servant. This is a deck where the Dismembers are useful, the Leyline of the Voids are useful, the Disruptor Flutes are useful. I'm not big on the Vexing Bauble. It does stop a bunch of their stuff, but if they're on the play, they're going to play them all out anyway, and then we just have this card that doesn't do that much. So I think those are the cuts. And I like the Kozilek's command to deal with the graveyard rather than having the Leyline. This is just a lot more flexible. Do I prefer Disruptor Flute or do I prefer Dismember? I think it's the Disruptor Flute because we just don't want our opponent to be able to say, oops, you're dead. So I think the Disruptor Flute is fine. Do we want any Dismembers? We probably board them in over endless ones, or we can just rely on this Kozilek's command because our opponent's creatures are going to be low CMCs. We can kill them with the command relatively easily. All right, I'm going to go in like this. I believe in what we're doing. This is a turn 2 Thought-Knot Seer, or turn 2 Fleshraker, turn 3 Thought-Knot Seer. This is fine, but not very exciting. We do have an answer for Eldrazi Saga though, so I'm going to believe in the answer to Eldrazi Saga. Hopefully we can find a red-green source. We've got a decent chunk of red and green sources, so you got to believe. A Kozilek's command. We can use this to cantrip if we want to. I think we play out the Wasteland here. Do we play out the Wasteland or do we keep that secret? I think we play out the Tomb. That way if we draw a temple we can just play the Thought-Knot Seer. And in an emergency we can something with this. So we could hit like a Fable token and draw a card. And that's reasonable. Painter's Servant. Okay. So we can kill this next turn if we want to. Do I want to Thought-Knot Seer my opponent? I think so. If they've got Soothing Spirit Guide Pyroblast, then, you know, that's going to get us anyway. What have we got here? Fable the Mirror Breaker, Source to Plowshares, Khan the Great Creator. So next time they play a Fable, I don't care too much about that one. I think we just take this Plow. And next turn we can Kozilek's command the Painter. Can we Glaring Fleshraker and do it? No. But if we find a colourless land, we have 6 mana, still not quite enough. Also this is an exile, which is pretty handy. Another Kozilek's command. Interesting. We could play a Mycospawn out. That's pretty strong here. So if we get an Eye of Ugin, that does allow us to immediately play this Fleshraker as well. I think that's the plan here, because that makes our Kozilek's commands way better. Oh, wait, no, this isn't colourless anymore, is it? Oh, yeah, that's my bad there. The Painter's Servant means that the Eye of Ugin doesn't actually reduce our thing. It doesn't reduce Eldrazi, it reduces colourless spells. And that was a little bit awkward for me there. Hopefully that won't end up mattering, but it could do. If we get the temple there, then we just get to do our thing. Khan the Great Creator, we knew about you. You go and fetch like an ancient tomb, an ensnaring bridge here. Now we can beat ensnaring bridge because we have the Fleshraker. A grindstone. Alrighty. That is a very different threat. Okay, we have to Kozilek's command down this Painter now. But that does unlock our Eye of Ugin to do some stuff. Right, they're playing out the grindstone as well, so we can't Thought-Knot Seer it away. Very understandable. Opponent's got 1 card in hand. If they attack with a Shaman token, it means it's a Pyroblast, which is going to be a real pain. If there's a Plow, we can live with that. Oh no, it's a Pyroblast. Oh, yikes. Oh, why didn't we block there? Alright, I just passed you that too quickly. Apologies, everyone. Okay, so we have to beat this Painter's Servant. So if we go 1, 2... We have to spend 4 mana to kill this. And then they just Pyroblast it. And then... Then what? If we... We don't really have a better option here, do we? Alright, so we'll remove the creature. And... I think we're just looking for some Eldrazi spawn here. Exile target creature, create some spawn. Here comes a Pyroblast. Oh no, they didn't have the Pyroblast. Oh. Well, that definitely changes things. That changes things in a big way. And play this Fleshraker now. We can go to attacks. This can kill the Khan. This can kill our opponent. Do we need to go both at Khan in case I have a bolt here? If I have a bolt, this might be able to get them a painter. Yeah, I think we have to just attack both at Khan. We can do a Kozilek's return. Kozilek's command for a reasonable amount here as well. So I'm just going to hold back on that in case we need it. A plow on the Thought-Knot Seer. They did have a plow. So I was right to send both at Khan. Beating the painter is going to be tough. A spell skite. That's certainly an annoying one. Alright, they didn't have anything there. That's pretty useful. So we can make them pay the 2 life here. We can block, and then we can just cast a Kozilek's command. We can exile a creature and just make a bunch of tokens and drain our opponent out here. So this is X equals 3 that we need to do here. There's 1, 2, and this makes 3, so X is 3. If they want to redirect this to Spellskite, then they take some damage. Alright. Eldrazi, the Linebreaker is going to be pretty big here. 1 card in our opponent's hand. It's on 9. There we go. The Linebreaker coming in clutch. Always believed in you. Let's cast this. It's going to make our guys pretty large. In comes a Linebreaker. We have a lot of power. Alright, we've got the GGs from the opponent here. We pinged our opponent down a whole bunch this turn. So, yeah. Deck went pretty well there. So we finished with a 4-1 record. A couple of 2-0s in there. We lost to that lands deck that was absolutely brutal. They just completely destroyed everything we were doing by turn 2. That deck looked quite exciting with the whole Nadu plus like a lands package. So maybe we'll investigate that and possibly play in the future. I don't know. So let's talk about the deck. There was definitely some tension in our deck about casting Eldrazi Linebreaker. This card was obviously great when we did cast it, but there was definitely some tension there. And the Mycospawn was great. It allowed us to double spell quite often, and it just could find us fixing if we needed it, or counter protection. We didn't actually go and find a Wasteland with it, but that's something we could have done with it. We found the Eldrazi Temple to help us double spell, or finding the Eye of Ugin, which is really gross with the Kozilek's command, because you fire this off, and then the next one you fire off has 2 reduction from it anyway. So you can just chain them into each other if you have the Eye of Ugin, and you're like drawing cards, which if you've got the Fleshraker is obviously fantastic, and you just drain your opponent out. We did do some big drains with the Fleshraker. But yeah, the deck seemed pretty solid. The Endless ones don't really seem great. I think I would kind of be interested in getting some Reality Smashers in there, a couple of Smashers for the Endless ones. That does mean that we are a little bit light on the 2-drop slot, but are we really wanting to play Endless one as a 2-drop? Like, we did do that a couple of times, but it's not really where you want to be. The Vexing Baubles didn't seem amazing, but we did have that round against the Grixis deck where this basically meant that the Force of Will was a thing they didn't get to do until like turn 5 or whatever. I think that was the Grixis deck. Or was that the Bant deck? I can't remember now. But either way, we did force a hard cast Force of Will out of our opponent by using the Vexing Baubles, which meant all of our stuff came in underneath it. And our creatures are big, right? They rumble pretty effectively. But that Nadu was pretty good at stopping us. We didn't have like the bigger creatures to go over the top, like the Reality Smasher. We kind of need Reality Smasher as like a complementary Linebreaker, because this can obviously make our guys big. But if it's making itself big, it's vulnerable to getting killed. Whereas ideally we want to like be pumping a spawn that we've made off of our Fleshraker. So it's sometimes got a little bit of tension there. And we do need like the bigger creatures to get through. Like this is a 3 toughness, this is 3 toughness, this is only 2 toughness, this is 2 toughness. Obviously if we have this, it pumps our other creatures. But there is definitely an issue slightly with the size of our creatures compared to previous Eldrazi decks where making a 5/5 on turn 2 or whatever is outclassing a lot of other stuff. But I do like this deck. I think the composition is pretty reasonable. If I was to change this, I'd be kind of tempted just to go more aggressive. So maybe we don't need the Baubles in the main at all, and we just play more creatures and just be a full-on Stompy deck without worrying about anything our opponent's doing. So we could jam in some Reality Smashers, maybe another Once Upon a Time to smooth out our opening draws and get more like big, powerful starts. Possibly run another piece of fast mana. That's kind of what these 5 cards could be. So we could have like 1 Once Upon a Time, 2 Smashers, maybe 3 Smashers, and then 1 more Simian Spirit Guide, something along those lines. Although if you're running those, you could run the Lotus Petals instead if we're not running the Baubles, although I do think we want Baubles somewhere in our 75. They do feel like a good thing we can be doing. I don't think this deck can play not Once Upon a Time. Ancient Stirrings is the other one I was thinking of. That is a thing that I've enjoyed quite a lot out of Eldrazi decks, is having the ability to just dig 5 cards and find what you want. Because if we're not playing anything particularly remarkable on turn 1, like we need to have a Soul Land and a Spirit Guide to play like any of the sort of like Fleshraker or Linebreaker type stuff. But we do still have Soul Land into it, the Heralds the End as a turn 1 play, which is a fine turn 1 play. Endless one on turn 1, not so good. So I think maybe the turn 1 play is where we can go here. Maybe it's Ancient Stirrings here that we could run. Or maybe we just want to stick with the Once Upon a Time. I do like the Once Upon a Time can find the Simian Spirit Guide, Elvish Spirit Guide. So you get a little bit more flexibility than if you were running Lotus Petal. But I think we showcase what this deck can do. The Chaining Kozileks with the Fleshraker is a really nice bit of reach that we can use to get out from underneath an ensnaring bridge or whatever. The utility of the Mycospawn is pretty tasty too. I do feel like we need a little bit of top end outside of like doing Fleshraker command things. Just another big monster like Reality Smasher. I'm partial to Reality Smashing. Sideboard wise, we didn't use that much of it just because the matchups we came up against. We didn't really want the Leylines because we weren't against like the big sort of graveyard decks, you know, like your Reanimator decks, your Oopsal spells, that sort of thing. That's why you really want these. Whereas I think fighting the painted decks, we're better off using, you know, Kozilek's command as graveyard hate that also can kill their creatures and stuff. Just seems really good. And a Disruptor Flute can just say no to a whole bunch of things, whether that's Karn or as a Saga or Grindstone itself. It just seems a little bit more of a flexible tool for that. And our creatures are so big that we don't need to care about our opponent's creatures in combat. We can just go through them. But yeah, for a sort of first draft of Red Green Eldrazi, I thought this went pretty well. If you've got any ideas on how to improve this, by all means let me know. I'm a big fan of Eldrazi. And what's more is this isn't a City of Traitors deck, which is nice. So it's relatively easy on the wallet as Legacy decks go. And it definitely felt like we were playing a proper Legacy deck today. Nice to play it against some of the scarier decks in the format, like the Scam deck, like Blue Black Scam, which somehow escaped bans this week, which is pretty mind-boggling. But there we are. It'd be interesting to see how that fares, because they could just take your Linebreaker with like a Grief and then reanimate it themselves and start beating you down, or they can take your Thought-Knot Seer and then bring that back, and then all of a sudden, instead of having a Grief in play, they've got a 4/4, so it's even quicker clock. There's, you know, I think there's going to be some issues against decks like that where they can also attack your mana base as well. But I think that's where the Vexing Bauble is actually going to be quite good, because it's going to stop them being able to Grief on turn 1, and it's going to stop them being able to Force of Will and deal with some of your threats that way. So maybe that's the way to go. Also, Vexing Bauble is very good against Cephalid Breakfast, which I think is a pretty strong deck right now. So there is a bunch of options for this deck. I think these are the slots that you can tinker with, but I kind of like everything else a fair bit here. Obviously, the Spirit Guides can change to Lotus Petals if you need that sort of effect and aren't running the Baubles. But I think Bauble is just better than Chalice of the Void in a lot of decks that look like this, because the decks that go underneath you, Vexing Bauble does a really good job of stopping. And sort of the middling decks where they're trying to knock you off balance with your Daisies and your Force of Wills and stuff, Vexing Bauble stops that too. So it kind of is good at defending or being proactive by making sure your things can get into play. So I like the Vexing Bauble quite a lot there. The one thing it doesn't stop, obviously, is Source to Plowshares, so they can plow your creatures. But some of our creatures have stuff attached to them, you know, things like Sowing Mycospawn. We're going to get some value out of that anyway. I wouldn't fault somebody for playing Chalice of the Void here, but I don't think you need to. If you want to run Vexing Bauble, you could even run, instead of Endless ones, you could run Ancient Stirrings. But I am a little bit sketchy about our green sources for doing that, because we've got only 6 lands that will cast Ancient Stirrings, so it's probably not where to be. But the Baubles and some more Once Upon a Time, something along these lines would be good. So maybe we either have 2 Smashers or 1 Smasher, 1 Once Upon a Time from these cards, just so we get the better earlier stuff. Maybe we could go down to 2 Baubles. Either way, I quite like this deck. I used to play Eldrazi Stompy back in the day. I think it's actually the record that I have, the deck that I have the best record with in Legacy at larger tournaments. I never failed to cash at tournaments by playing Eldrazi Stompy. I didn't play in that many tournaments with it, but it was like 5-6 tournaments or something like that, where every time I played it, I managed to cash with Eldrazi Stompy. Never won any of those tournaments, sadly, but we managed to cash in like top 16 in all of them, which is pretty good. So there is definitely a part of me that loves a bit of Eldrazi Stompy. And Glaring Fleshraker is just cool, right? I like the new angle that this provides to these sorts of Stompy decks of being able to get over the finish line. Yeah, this deck is really sweet. I would recommend it. It's a lot of fun. Sometimes you just want to play some big Stompy guys and smash down, and this is definitely the deck for that. I think in a world where we used to be getting smashed up by Initiative, and then that kind of went away, and then Goblins was the big Stompy deck, maybe now Eldrazi is the big Stompy deck that we want to be playing with. It certainly feels like a fun one and a strong one. Alright, thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and let me know your thoughts on this deck, and anything you'd like to see in an Eldrazi deck moving forward, or anything you think should be cut from this list. Anything at all, let me know. I'm really interested in your thoughts. Alright, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye. If you'd like to support me in the channel, please check out my Patreon. It has a free guide to budget turbo depths, as well as 3 tiers of support. A low cost one that enters you into my monthly raffle for a free donation deck on the channel, a mid-tier subscription that gives you access to my detailed turbo depths guide that is updated every month, as well as regular articles, and lastly the higher tier gives you all of the above, as well as a monthly donation deck for my channel. If you're interested in supporting the channel this way, please check out the link in the description.